The third footstep was what made me stop pretending. 2 could have been a deer. 2 could have been the wind moving a branch the wrong way against the canvas of my tent. But the third one came down with weight, and weight that knew what it was doing, and it was less than 10 feet from my head. I was in the boundary waters. Late September, the kind of week where the lake starts steaming in the morning and the loons sound like they're saying goodbye. I'd done this trip every year for 6 years, always solo, always the same loop. 3 nights, 4 lakes, 2 short portages, and 1 campsite I liked enough to hike past 2 others to reach. It sits on a granite spine that drops into water on 3 sides. Low pines around a fire ring. The kind of place you write about in a notebook that nobody else will ever read. I'd gotten there by mid-afternoon on day 2. Set up the tent. Filtered 4 liters of water. Cooked freeze-dried pad thai out of a foil pouch. By the time the sun went down behind the far ridge, I was inside my sleeping bag with a paperback and a headlamp on the lowest red setting, and I was the kind of tired that feels earned. There was nobody else on the lake. I'd seen 1 canoe at noon, 3 lakes back, and the way they were moving they were headed home, not deeper. So when I heard the first footstep, I told myself it was nothing. Black bear, maybe. They come through camps. They sniff and move on, especially this late in the year when they're trying to put weight on for winter and the smell of pad thai is more interesting than I am. I'd hung my food bag in a tree 200 feet from the tent like I always do. There was nothing in my tent for them to want. The second footstep came 30 seconds later. It wasn't a bear. I knew that immediately, even before my brain had time to catch up to the knowing. Bears don't pause between steps. They don't take one and listen and take another. They walk the way an animal walks, for legs and a rhythm and a destination. Whatever was outside my tent had taken 2 steps and stopped between them, and the stop was the part that scared me, because the stop was a decision. I lay there with the paperback open on my chest and the headlamp glowing red against the inside of my eyelids, and I tried to breathe through my nose. Slow. Quiet. The way you breathe when you're pretending to be asleep. The third step came from the other side of the tent. I want to be very clear about this part. The first 2 steps were on the lake side, between my tent and the granite that dropped into the water. The third step was on the trail side, between my tent and the woods. Whatever was out there had moved. It had moved silently, between footsteps, around the back of my tent, and put the 4th corner of itself somewhere I couldn't see. That's when I stopped pretending. I reached for my headlamp and turned it off. Not because I thought darkness would protect me. Because the red glow inside the tent was the only thing in the entire forest that said where I was, and I wanted to take that away from whatever was making the decisions outside. The tent went black. My eyes adjusted. Through the mesh window above my head I could see the shape of branches against the sky, and a few stars, and nothing else. Then a hand touched the side of the tent. Not a paw. Not a branch. A hand. I could see the shape of it pressed against the rainfly from the outside, 5 fingers, splayed, fingertips dragging slowly down the nylon. The fabric tented inward where each finger pressed. It made a sound like a child running their hand along a balloon. I have never been so scared. I want to tell you that, and I want you to understand that I don't mean scared the way people mean it when they're describing a movie. I mean my body forgot how to do anything. My hands didn't work. My lungs didn't work. My bladder almost let go. I lay there inside that sleeping bag and I watched a hand drag itself slowly down the side of my tent, and I did not move and I did not breathe and I did not make a single sound. The hand stopped at the bottom seam. Then it lifted. Then it did it again. Slower this time. From the top of the tent down to the bottom. 5 fingers. Dragging. Have you ever felt like something was watching you? Tell me in the comments. Because what I felt in that tent wasn't watching. It was deciding. Whatever was out there had already seen me. It already knew exactly where I was lying. The hand wasn't looking for me. The hand was checking. I made myself think. My knife was in the side pocket of my pack, 3 feet from my head. My bear spray was clipped to the outside of the pack. My phone had no signal, hadn't had signal since the put-in. The nearest other human being was probably 6 miles away through dense forest in the dark. My canoe was 30 yards down the rock at the waterline. If I could get to the canoe, I could be in the middle of the lake in 2 minutes. The middle of the lake was the only place I could think of where a hand couldn't reach me. The hand dragged down the tent a 3rd time. Then it stopped. I waited. I waited a long time. Long enough that the cold from the granite under the tent floor started to come up through my sleeping pad. Long enough that my legs started to cramp from holding still. Long enough that I started to wonder if I had imagined the whole thing. I did not imagine the whole thing. The 4th time wasn't a hand. The 4th time was a voice. It was right next to my head. Through the mesh window. Maybe 4 inches from my ear. It was a man's voice, soft, almost gentle, and what it said was, "You're awake." I'd like to say I did something brave. I didn't. I think part of my mind unhooked itself in that moment and went somewhere else, because what I remember next is being out of the tent. Not unzipping the door. Not standing up. Just out. Barefoot on the granite. Pack in one hand, sleeping bag dragging from the other, my paperback abandoned somewhere in the dark, and I was running for the canoe and I was not looking back. I got the canoe in the water. I don't remember how. The paddle was clipped to the inside of the hull and I pulled it free and I pushed off the rock with both feet and I paddled until my arms gave out, which was about 400 yards from shore, and then I sat in the middle of that lake at maybe 1 in the morning and I floated. The water was perfectly still. The kind of still where the stars on the surface of the lake look like the same stars in the sky and you can't tell which way is up. I sat in that stillness and I waited. If this story is keeping you up, subscribe. We post new horror every night. Eventually the light came. Not sunrise, the kind of gray before sunrise where the world starts to have edges again. I could see the campsite from where I was floating. I could see my tent, still pitched, still standing, the rainflies still on it. And I could see the figure of a man standing next to it. He was watching the lake. He was watching me. He was tall. Even from 400 yards I could tell he was tall. He didn't move. He just stood next to my tent and he watched me float in the middle of the lake, and he stood there for what I am guessing was 20 minutes, and then the sun came up and he walked into the woods and he was gone. I waited 2 more hours before I paddled back. The tent was still standing. Everything inside it was exactly where I'd left it. My paperback was face down on the sleeping pad, page still bookmarked. My food bag was still hung in the tree. Nothing had been taken. Nothing had been moved. Except on the outside of the tent, on the side where the hand had been, there were 5 faint smudges in the morning dew. 5 fingertips. dragging from top to bottom. 3 times. I packed up my camp in 20 minutes. I paddled 6 miles back to the put-in by noon. I did not stop. I did not eat. I did not look at the shore. I told the ranger when I checked out. He listened with the kind of careful neutral expression rangers get when they think you're either lying or losing your mind. He said he'd note it. He said the campsite I'd been at was a popular one. He said sometimes hikers see things that aren't there after enough nights alone. I asked him if anyone else had reported anything that summer. He looked at me for a long second and then he said, "I'd rather not say. I haven't gone back. It's been 2 years. I have a friend who does the same loop every fall and he keeps inviting me, and every fall I tell him I can't make it that weekend, and every fall I lie about why. What would you have done?" I still wonder to this day. Subscribe for more horror every single night. And if you want more stories that will keep you up, check out What the Wow Stories for the wildest relationship drama you've ever heard. Link below. Sleep well. My wife noticed it first. 3 tents on the ridge above us, where there had been nothing the night before. No fire. No voices. No sign that anyone had hiked in or set up camp. Just 3 identical green dome tents, perfectly spaced, on a flat patch of ground that had been empty when we'd gone to sleep. We were on the second night of a 5-day trip in the Ozarks. A loop trail, primitive sites only, no cell service. We'd done the same trip 3 years in a row. Lauren liked to call it our anniversary trip even though we weren't married yet at that point, just close to it. We had been together 6 years. We knew each other's silences. That morning, when she came back from the creek with the water filter and stood at the entrance of our tent, the silence she made was a kind I hadn't heard from her before. "Mark." I was making coffee on the little jet boil. I looked up. She was looking past me, up the slope behind our tent, at the ridge. I followed her eyes. The ridge was maybe 60 yards above us. A flat shelf of land just below the next switchback, where the official trail curved around a stand of oaks. The campsite we were using was the only sanctioned site for 2 miles in either direction. The ridge wasn't a campsite. It was just flat ground above us. And on it, in a line that ran parallel to the trail, were 3 identical tents. Same brand. Same color. Same orange guy line clipped to a stake at the same angle on each one. The kind of identical that you don't get by accident, even with people who shop at the same store. You only get that kind of identical when somebody has set them up on purpose, the same way, 3 times in a row. There was no fire ring. No backpacks outside. No bear bag in any of the trees. No sound. The flaps on all 3 tents were zipped shut. When did they come in? Lauren asked. I didn't have an answer. I'd gotten up twice in the night to pee. Once around midnight. Once around 3. Both times the ridge had been empty. I had specifically noticed both times, because the moon had been bright enough to light up that whole shelf of ground, and there had been nothing on it. We made coffee. We tried to act like it was normal. There are people in the woods sometimes. Backpackers come in late, especially the silent ones, the ones who don't want to bother neighboring sites. Maybe they'd done a night hike. Maybe they were tired and didn't want conversation. But 3 identical tents. Lauren said it before I did. Should we leave? I told her we were fine. I told her people are weird. I told her we were probably going to walk past their site in 2 hours when we packed up, and they'd be eating oatmeal and tying boots, and we'd say hi, and they'd be a youth group or a hunting club or something perfectly normal, and we'd laugh about it tomorrow. We packed up. We hiked up the switchback. When we got to the ridge, the tents were gone. Not packed up. Not folded. Not being broken down. Gone. The flat patch of ground where they had been an hour earlier was empty. No footprints. No tent stakes left in the dirt. No matted down circles of grass where anything had been pitched. The shelf of land looked exactly like it had every other year we had hiked past it, which was never used. Lauren stood at the edge of the trail and looked at the empty ground and said, very quietly, "Mark, I don't want to do this trail anymore. I'm going to tell you the rest of this in order, because if I jump around, you're going to think I'm lying." We hiked out the same way we had come in. We didn't finish the loop. We turned around at the ridge and we hiked back to the trailhead, 8 miles, and we didn't stop except to drink water. Lauren didn't talk for the first 3 miles. I don't blame her. There wasn't anything to say. About halfway back, we passed a section of trail where the path narrows between 2 boulders. There's a notch you have to step through. As I came around the second boulder, 10 feet ahead of Lauren, I saw something on the ground. Have you ever felt like something was watching you? Tell me in the comments. Because what I saw on the ground was a small pile of objects, arranged carefully, in the middle of the trail. A toothbrush. A sock. A rolled-up pair of socks. A water bottle. A small plastic bag of trail mix. A headlamp. A fork. They were arranged in a tight rectangle. Not dropped. Arranged. The way you'd lay out the contents of someone's pack if you were inventorying it. Lauren came around the boulder and stopped. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't have to. She knew what it was. We both knew. It was the contents of one person's pack. Spread out in the middle of a trail, 8 miles from the nearest road, with no one around. And the toothbrush still had the price tag on it. The price tag was the part that broke me. A toothbrush you've used has a relationship with the person who used it. The bristles bend a certain way. The handle gets scuffed. This toothbrush had never been in a mouth. It had been brought into the woods, and arranged on the ground for someone to find. Same with the trail mix. The bag was unopened. The seal was intact. Whoever laid these objects out was not a hiker who had been attacked. Whoever laid these objects out had brought new things into the woods to put on the ground. I want you to think about that for a second. Somebody had hiked at least 4 miles in, with a fresh toothbrush and a sealed bag of trail mix and a brand new pair of socks, and arranged them in the middle of a trail, and walked away. Why? Why would anyone do that? Whatever the answer is, none of the answers are good ones. I picked nothing up. I'm proud of that. I think a lot of people would have at least poked at it, kicked it aside, taken a closer look. We didn't. We stepped around it and we kept walking and we didn't stop and we didn't talk about it for the next 3 miles. I kept looking back over my shoulder. Lauren wouldn't. She told me later she was afraid that if she turned her head, she'd see somebody behind us, and she didn't want to know. When we got to the parking lot at the trailhead, my Subaru was the only car there. The same as when we'd put in the trailhead register, when I flipped it open, showed only our 2 names since the previous week. Lauren and Mark, in. No one else. If this story is keeping you up, subscribe. We post new horror every night. I'm going to skip ahead, because the part you actually want to know about is what happened that night. We drove 3 hours to a hotel in Springfield. Lauren wanted to drive home, but we had been awake since 5 and I didn't trust my reflexes for the full 8-hour drive. We checked into a Hampton Inn on the highway. 2 queens. Continental breakfast. The lights of the truck stop across the street washing in through the curtain. We were asleep by 10. I woke up at 2:14 in the morning. I know the time because I checked. Lauren was sitting up in the bed next to mine. She was facing the window. The curtains were closed. She was completely still. I said her name. She didn't move. I said it again. She turned her head slowly toward me, and in the orange wash of the parking lot lights through the curtain, I could see her face, and her eyes were closed, and she said, very softly, "They followed us." Then she lay back down. She did not open her eyes. She did not wake up. By morning she did not remember saying it. She did not remember sitting up. She remembered nothing. I have never gone back to that trail. Lauren and I got married 8 months later. We have hiked dozens of trails together since. We have a good life. The only rule we have is that one. We do not go back to that loop. I did, eventually, look up the trail registry online. The agency keeps records. I checked the names of every party that had hiked that loop the year before our trip and the year after. I was looking for anything. A pattern. 3-person parties. Solo hikers who didn't come back. Anything. I found one entry that I keep thinking about. 3 names, signed in on a Saturday. Same handwriting for all 3. No surnames. Just first names. The word "out" was never written next to any of them. What would you have done? I still wonder to this day. Subscribe for more horror every single night. And if you want more stories that will keep you up, check out What the Wow Stories for the wildest relationship drama you've ever heard. Link below. Sleep well. The thing nobody tells you about the desert at night is how loud it is. People think because it's empty, it's silent. It isn't. Wind makes a sound moving across sand that it doesn't make moving across grass. Lizards click. Owls breathe. The air cools so fast that pebbles crack on the rocks they've been sitting on all summer. The desert at night is full of noises, and after a few nights of camping in it, you learn which noises mean the desert and which noises mean something else. The clinking was something else. I was outside Joshua Tree, about an hour east of the main park on BLM land where you can pull off and camp for free. I'd been doing it for a week. I had vacation time burning a hole through my paid leave, and a girlfriend who had just broken up with me, and a Subaru Outback I had been sleeping in the back of since Tuesday. It was Friday night. I was alone. I had not seen another vehicle in 2 days. I had pulled off the main dirt road about a quarter mile, parked between 2 creosote bushes, set up a small camp chair, made coffee on a propane stove, and watched the sun go down behind a rock formation that looked like a fist. By the time the sky was full dark, I was lying on my back on a foam pad on the hood of my car with a beer and a podcast in my ears, and I felt the kind of okay that I had not felt in 3 months. I took the earbuds out around 10 because I wanted to hear coyotes. That's when I heard the first clink. It was metal on metal. Far away. Maybe a quarter mile, maybe more. Distance is hard in the desert at night. It came once, then nothing for 30 seconds, then came again. Soft. Almost musical. The kind of sound a wind chime makes if you only have two pieces. I sat up. There was nothing to see. The desert in front of me was lit by the moon and full of nothing but creosote and rocks. Behind me, the dirt road I had come in on was a pale ribbon. There were no headlights anywhere. No campfires. No tents. Nothing but the sound of metal touching metal, somewhere out in the open, getting slowly closer. I got off the hood. I went to the side of the car and I opened the back hatch and I got my flashlight, the big one, the spotlight kind, and I pointed it out into the desert in the direction of the sound and I clicked it on. The beam went out about 200 yards before it lost itself in the dark. There was nothing in it. The clinking stopped. Then it started again, this time from a slightly different direction. To the left. Maybe behind a low rise that I hadn't noticed in the daylight. I swung the flashlight that way. I clicked it off. I waited. The clinking came again. Closer. I want to tell you something about being alone in the desert. I have done this trip 8 or 9 times. I have camped on this BLM land before. I have heard a lot of strange things at night, and I have always been able to talk myself into a rational explanation. Coyotes. Mice. The wind. The metal expansion of my own car cooling down. I could not talk myself out of this one. The sound was not random. It was rhythmic. It was the rhythm of something walking, something with metal on it, something taking step after step in my direction. I got in the car. I locked the doors. I want to be clear about that, because some part of me, even at the time, felt foolish doing it. The car had been mine for 9 years. I had never locked it on BLM land before. Nobody is going to walk up on you on BLM land. There is nobody to walk up on you. I locked the doors anyway. I sat in the driver's seat with the keys in the ignition and the engine off and the windows up. The flashlight was in my lap. The clinking continued. It was getting closer. I could hear individual steps now. The rhythm was, clink, pause, clink, pause. About a step every 2 seconds. The pace of someone walking slowly across uneven ground. When it was about 30 yards out, I turned the headlights on. I want to describe what I saw very carefully, because I have spent 2 years thinking about it, and I want to get it right. There was a figure. Standing in the desert in front of my car. It was a person. I think. It was the size of a person. It was the shape of a person. It was wearing what looked like a long dark coat that came down to the knees, and on its feet were what looked like boots, and around its neck and shoulders and arms, and this is the part one cannot explain, were what looked like dozens of metal cans. Tin cans. Strung on lengths of wire. Hanging from its body like the chains on a hanging dog tag, but the size of a person. When the figure shifted its weight, the cans clinked. That was the sound. It did not move when the headlights hit it. It did not flinch. It did not turn away. It just stood there, in the wash of my high beams, in the middle of the desert, at 10:30 at night, with cans hanging off it. I could not see its face. The brim of something, a hat, maybe, was angled down. I could see the lower half of its jaw. I could see its mouth. Its mouth was open. It was not smiling. It was not snarling. The mouth was just open, slack, the way a mouth hangs open when somebody is breathing through it because they cannot breathe through their nose. It took a step toward the car. The cans clinked. I have never been so scared. Have you ever felt like something was watching you? Tell me in the comments. Because this thing was not watching me. This thing had walked a quarter mile through open desert in the dark to come stand in front of my car, and now it was deciding what to do next. I started the engine. I want you to know that I was shaking so hard I missed the ignition with the key on the first try. I had to look down. I had to look down at the keys. And in the second I was looking down, the figure took 2 more steps, and when I looked up, it was at the front bumper. I put the car in reverse and I floored it. The Outback fishtailed in the loose dirt. I hit a creosote bush. I felt branches scrape the side of the car. I kept the gas pedal down. I went backwards until I hit the dirt road, then I cranked the wheel and I came out of reverse and I went forward and I drove and I did not stop until I was on pavement. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I did not look in the side mirrors. I drove for about 40 minutes, until I was at a pilot truck stop on the interstate, and I parked in a brightly lit row near the front doors, and I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off and I shook for a long time. The next morning I drove back. In daylight. With another camper I'd talked into riding along with me, a guy from Arizona who had been at the truck stop charging his phone. I told him most of what had happened. He thought I was lying. He came along anyway because he wanted to see. If this story is keeping you up, subscribe. We post new horror every night. We found my campsite. The camp chair was still set up. The propane stove was where I had left it. The cooler was unopened. In the dirt, leading away from where I had parked, were 2 long parallel grooves. Like something had been dragged. The grooves went out into the desert about 30 yards. Then they stopped. There was no body. No trash. No cans. No footprints. No coat. No hat. The grooves just stopped, in the middle of the open desert, with nothing at the end of them. The guy from Arizona looked at the grooves for a long time. Then he looked at me. Then he said, "We should go." I packed up in 5 minutes. I drove home that day. I have not gone back to the desert at night since. I have a friend who works for the BLM. I told him about it, last year. He didn't laugh. He didn't tell me I was making it up. He told me they get reports like that maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Always solo campers. Always at night. Always something with metal on it. He said the official position is that it's drug runners, or border crossers, or people doing illegal trapping. He said the unofficial position is that he doesn't drive that road at night anymore. What would you have done? I still wonder to this day. Subscribe for more horror every single night. And if you want more stories that will keep you up, check out What the Wow Stories for the wildest relationship drama you've ever heard. Link below. Sleep well.